Environmental ethics has come a long way in its development. It has become an integral part of our daily lives, from our mere daily decisions to our lifelong plans, and within such courses of actions, the welfare of others, more than ourselves, is oftentimes considered. These others would in turn extend to fellow humans, to animals, plants, and the whole ecosystem. Thus, we are given the overall structure of environmental ethics. Philosophers, ethicists, and thinkers alike are drawn to revisiting and reformulating our past ethical approaches to include these non-human entities in our moral sphere. I am Sir Paul from UPLB, Department of Humanities Philosophy Division. In this lecture, I will present the breakdown of the four main approaches in environmental ethics, and such approaches could span the inclusion of theories, practices, and policies, courses of actions done by philosophers, scholars, policymakers, societies, and regular individuals. The four main approaches are such. First, we have anthropocentrism. Next, we have animal liberation or animal welfare. Third, we have biocentrism. And lastly, we have ecocentrism. This overall breakdown could be understood using the concept of expansionism in environmental ethics, which is easily understood using three concepts as introduced by Arenaise in his Deep Ecology movement and other environmental ethicists. Environmental ethics could be categorized into three: light green or shallow ethics, mid-green or intermediate ethics, and dark green or deep ecology, or sometimes called holistic ethics or ecocentric ethics. In the first environmental ethics approach, under shallow ecology or light green ethics, we have anthropocentrism. Through the name itself, which means human-centeredness, everything of priority, such as the recognition of intrinsic value, is bestowed upon human species alone. What sort of thinking or courses of actions could fall under this? Since ethics originally, and sometimes arguably, to be essentially focused on human conduct alone, our classical environmental theories would fall under such an approach. The discussion of such theories, like the three reigning ethical theories that we have, namely virtue ethics, utilitarianism, and Kantian ethics, would retain the traditional reading of these theories as analyzed simply alongside environmental considerations. Take, for example, Aristotle's virtue ethics, which is focused on the flourishing of one's moral character or virtue to attain eudaimonia, or what we call happiness. The practice of virtue, in Aristotelian sense, is said to be found between the extremes of excess and deficiency of a given action. This actualization of virtue is in turn highly dependent on what we call external goods or one's resources. Thus, Aristotle highlights that it would be impossible for one to become virtuous if one lacks these external goods, which necessarily includes the environment. In utilitarianism, the end is also understood in terms of happiness, with varying interpretations of happiness, thus creating the divide between attaining greater happiness in terms of its quality, while on the other side in terms of quantity. Regardless, the role played by the environment in these theories is still the utilization of the environment to produce the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Lastly, in Kantian ethics, it is most evident here that the value bestowed upon the environment would never count as an end but always as a means, since ascribing intrinsic value to the environment would go contrary to the categorical imperative. Despite seeing the value of the environment in anthropocentrism as reduced merely to means for human ends, other anthropocentric approaches try to reevaluate the environment to seemingly elevate its value, such as in the concept of stewardship. Some scholars, like Wendell Berry in his article The Gift of Good Land, and Patrick Dobell in his article The Judeo-Christian Stewardship Attitude to Nature, which recognizes respect for God's creations. Thus, despite coming from a purely anthropocentric perspective, they could address ethical matters concerning misuse and abuse of the environment. In the second environmental ethics approach, under mid-green or intermediate ethics, we have concerns towards animal welfare or animal liberation. In this approach, recognition of intrinsic value is bestowed upon entities that feel pleasure and pain like us humans. Thus, the task is achieved through the inclusion of animals to our moral consideration, to the extent of equating their worth with that of ours. Peter Singer, in his book Animal Liberation, written in 1957, and The Expanding Circle, written in 1981, argues that the capacity to reason is not enough to be the frame of reference to have moral consideration. It should rather be the capacity to feel pleasure and pain. In addition, it is argued that even the most rational animals could be of greater worth compared to a human with lesser rationality. to that of the former entity. The establishment of animal rights also fall under this approach since the recognition of animals' intrinsic value is then protected through legal matters alongside existing rights that we have as human beings. This in turn manifests into policies and laws such as Republic Act 8485 or the Animal Welfare Act of 1998. We also have animal rights and animal welfare agencies and advocates like Philippine Animal Welfare Society, or what we call PAWS, and Philippine Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or PSPCA. Animal rights defenders and animal rights advocates also exist under this approach, such as what we call People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA, and Worldwide Fund for Nature, or WWF. Various movements relating to diet and lifestyle, such as veganism and vegetarianism, also recognizes the prevention of animal cruelty, still rooting from the recognition of their intrinsic value. Treatment of animals as family members, and not merely in terms of utility, also fall under this second approach. A very common practice nowadays, some people would go the extra mile in providing their pets decent food, shelter, and even clothing. For the third and fourth approaches, biocentrism and ecocentrism, they both fall under dark green or deep ecology due to the intersection of some of their key points. The third environmental ethics approach is biocentrism, from the name itself, which means life-centeredness. Recognition of intrinsic value is bestowed upon entities that are alive, or to put it simply, all living things have intrinsic value. Paul Taylor, in his book, The Ethics of Respect for Nature, written in 1981, introduces the concept of Earth's community of life, which highlights that the interdependence and interrelatedness of the members of the community ought to be respected and they are all of equal value. Laws and policies concerning the conservation and preservation of certain plant species falls under this category as well. Agencies such as Greenpeace also uphold such value of life in general, as manifested in their goal to ensure the ability of the earth to nurture life in all its diversity. This last approach, ecocentrism, comes from the Greek word eco, which means home. It takes a more holistic analysis of the environment, for it treats abiotic or non-living entities as actual members of the community, existing alongside the living ones. The interrelation of both biotic and abiotic entities is always highlighted in such an approach. Aldo Leopold, in his book A Sound County Almanac, written in 1949, introduces the community concept, which recognizes the equality between the members of the biotic community, analyzed alongside this notion of the land pyramid, which emphasizes the transfer of energies circulating within these entities. Although found at the far end of our environmental ethics expansion, Leopold's work is said to be one of the first literatures in environmental ethics. Gaia hypothesis, which was first introduced by James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis in the 1970s, also recognizes the Earth's complex system that sustains life. Rachel Carson, in her book Silent Spring, written in 1962, exposes the harmful effects of pesticides towards the environment. Ecofeminism, first called by Françoise de Yobon in her book Les Féministes ou la Mort, written in 1974, comes from a feminist perspective in analyzing the interrelation of humans and the environment in terms of gender. From the attachment of domestic roles to women, such as the act of nurturing, there comes a recognition of the Mother Earth or the Mother Nature concepts that we know now, battling against the commodification and devaluation of nature, which is said to be rooted from patriarchal valuations. Animism, the attribution of soul to animals, plants, rivers, natural phenomena, and the like, in turn leads to the recognition of their worth equal to that of ours. In one of the lecture videos from this series, Dr. Janet Eliasol Nabal presented her article entitled From Capre to Ecological Conscience, Indigenous Beliefs and Practices and the Holistic Perspective of Environmental Ethics, written in 2002, which discusses how our local indigenous beliefs, such as the belief of a Capre inhabiting a balete vine, or the old saying that a butterfly is the visiting spirit of a dead loved one, leads to the respect towards nature. Trendy environmental acts like eco-friendliness and eco-labeling, such as patronization of eco-products, is also a rampant ecocentric approach nowadays. In summary, we have this richness of environmental ethics approaches spanning from anthropocentrism to ecocentrism, from a lighter shade of green to a darker shade one, offering varieties of solutions to the fundamental environmental ethics question, how one ought to live in terms of moral consideration towards the environment. And such investigations do not fall short in the further reformulations and development in the future once we recognize the inevitable ever-changing state of the environment and the emergence of ever-growing environmental concerns.